Hi there, everybody. Just doing a little general feedback on what you've done for Module 3. Um, I left written feedback for you on I think it was on the tenure laws and board policies threaded discussion. I left less feedback, written feedback on the whole brain teaching threaded discussion and the teacher observation or instructional leadership in action. Because I just wanted to, there were a lot of common themes for these things that I just thought it would be more efficient to address directly. I do want to speak a little bit about the tenure laws and board policies, just a general thing. Some of my takeaways, I guess I didn't realize quite how much there was a variance in teaching tenure laws, even in this Midwestern area. When we talk about Iowa and Illinois and Missouri and Nebraska and Kansas, states that are connected, but the laws vary so much. And even in the framework of those states that do have tenure, which I had forgotten that Kansas abolished tenure. I didn't realize that Iowa didn't have tenure, even though I grew up in Iowa. And even in the states that do have tenure, Nebraska I think it was a 3-year in Nebraska. Illinois was 2, Missouri was 5 or 4 in some cases. So those were some takeaways for me, some aha moments on that. Some of you had commented that you didn't care one way or another about teacher tenure, and I've been down that road a little bit before. In terms of me coming to the administration angle of it, I actually came to care probably more about teacher tenure as an administrator than I did as a teacher, believe it or not, because I wanted the teachers that work with me to have some sort of professional status, if that makes sense. There's so many other crappy things, quite honest, that come with the teaching profession. I wanted to have that professional status for the teachers that I worked with, especially when I was their administrator. And I think that meant something to me on their behalf. And also, in some ways, tenure is a protection. I told some stories for the feedback that I made about times as an administrator where I was pressured by board members to recommend for non-renewal certain teachers, not based on their classroom skills, but based on the fact that I don't think that guy likes my kid, kind of thing. Or as a teacher, I worked with colleagues who were coaches that were let go from their teaching positions. They didn't yet have tenure. It wasn't because they weren't good classroom teachers. It was because they, for whatever reason, had, quote, failed, unquote, as a coach. And those of us who have coached, we know that, by golly, the better our players are, the more successful we are as coaches. So there's just a lot of stuff that goes along with that. And tenure, I do think, offers a modicum of protection from the whims of board members and public perception of you in a district. So those are my thoughts on that, and you're free to not have those thoughts or have different thoughts, as many of you likely do. In terms of the stuff that you did for observations, the videos that you watched and the observations that you filled out specifically, or the conversations that you tried to recreate on the threaded discussion, it's obviously not an exact replication of what can happen. One of the things that I was interested in is there was a lot of variance, actually, sometimes significant variance on how you viewed certain lessons, depending on probably your own background and background knowledge about things. It's never a perfect system. Contextually, there's just a lot of stuff there that we didn't know. And so my hope is that you keep that in mind too when you are administrators. There's contextually some stuff that you didn't know. Some stuff that I did notice kind of consistently across the board. Most of you, when you either spoke to your people as you'd written, in the threaded discussion, or even on the forms that you kind of filled out, many of you went for what I often call the crap sandwich, which is, hey, this was a really good thing. You should really work on these things. But overall, things were really good. So we call that the crap sandwich. You place the thing that's the the crappy thing, the thing that people need to work on, you place that in the middle between two different positives, and that tends to be how things go sometimes. But what I would say is this: if as an administrator you really do notice something that generally needs work, that it's a serious concern of yours, the crap sandwich is fine for little things. If it's a big thing, just take the buns off. And if it's something that you need to have a conversation with your teacher about, just say, hey, here's what I noticed the last time I was in your room. This is a thing that I really wanted to bring to your attention because I know that you'd want to work on it as well. And just eliminate the bun on that. Just if there's something that really needs improvement, go right for that. Although here's a caveat to that, and I'm approaching 6 minutes here, so we'll get this done. But if you identify something as problematic, whatever it is, rather than coming in and bombarding, which in some cases, some of the documents that you had produced, there was, quite honestly, there may have been some bombarding in the framework of that document. And I don't think that's what you intended, but sometimes those documents, it's like my dad writes to me in all caps on email. I never know if he's actually mad at me or not, but it seems like it because he writes to me in all caps all the time. If you identify something as problematic, rather than going off about it, maybe there are some things that you can do initially. My preferred method was to kind of ask questions. Here's what I saw. Is that what you meant to have happen? And if that was the case, then there might be some ways we can direct you from that. Or if that wasn't the case, then you might ask this question: well, how next time that you present this lesson, and knowing that this was an issue, how might you choose to improve that? And if you ask those questions, there might be contextually some things that come out of there that you weren't aware of about why it was done in a particular way, and it may make more sense, or it may not. But rather than just flaming in the framework of this is bad and this is bad and this is bad, contextually just try to ask some of those questions. And if there is something that's glaring and you write it down, I wouldn't just leave that as feedback. If there's something that's glaring, I feel like you as an administrator need to speak to that, maybe even before they see the written documentation of it, and that will contextualize that for both you and for them, and that becomes very important in that way. We're approaching 8 minutes here, and that's probably enough. What you guys did, this is good stuff this week. There was some variance, as I said. I guess the last thing I'll talk about is those variances. I mean, some of you thought certain teachers had done quite well, and some of you saw it completely differently. And that is in many ways your prerogative as an administrator, but you just need to make sure that you contextually know what's happening in that classroom. And so those conversations that you have with teachers become very important. If you are, as a district committed to specific targets for a year, you should make sure your observations kind of hit those targets as well. And if you see other things that come out to you, then speak to those too. But just make sure that you always have the teacher in framework of input in that conversation. It shouldn't just be a top-down thing. There should be, especially in the observation component of it, there should be some give and take. It should never just be you saying this is what you thought about it. It should be, let's have a breakdown conversation about what we saw together. And with that, I think I'll close. I've taken enough of your time. Thanks for what you've done this week. I look forward to talking with you more next week. Take care.